Henry is a member of our San Francisco chapter of the National Aging in Place Council. I'm really excited to have her as a speaker today. She is going to be our first, I believe, our first ever national presentation on transportation. And she is the expert. She does this for a living. In fact, right before we came on, she said she just came back from a driving assessment. So I can't wait to hear what those assessments entail and all of her tips for where are my keys. So thank you so much, Melanie, for joining us. I'll be manning the chat box. Would you prefer to hold questions to the end, or do you want me to let you know as they pop up?
Whatever works for you, I'm fine either way.
Okay, then I will let you know as they pop up.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, Melanie. It's all yours.
Okay, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Melanie Henry, and I am the founder and CEO of the Driver Cognitive Assessment Centre. A little bit about me. I have a background in social welfare. My degree is in that, and I worked in criminal child abuse investigation in Australia for many years. And I moved to the US back in 2007 and thought that it would be like riding a bike, going back into that field of work, but alas, it was no longer for me. So I really wanted to work with a vulnerable population, with other folks that were at risk, and I kind of fell into the world of caregiving and found that that was really where my heart was singing. And I also had to learn how to drive on the other side of the road. When I moved here, we have our steering wheel on the right and driving on the other side. So that was really, really challenging for me. So I, have an additional kind of sensitivity to people who are having some driving challenges. So in 2019, I set up this assessment center. I cover all of the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm licensed to use, you can see on the screen, Drive-Able Empirica technology. And what my service is I offer a science-based driving assessment that's measuring the interaction of mental abilities needed for safe driving. I have an in-office assessment, I have an on-road evaluation, and I also offer a mature driver refresher together session for those drivers that are safe to drive and they are looking to get back behind the wheel. Maybe they haven't done so much driving since the pandemic, or maybe there's been some decline in their physical mobility, or they've had some other kind of medical condition. They're all cleared to drive, but they need to regain their confidence. So that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell, and have been learning everything that I can about the whole driving field, and I'm currently going through my certification to become a driver rehabilitation professional. I'm also a licensed driving instructor, and I'm really excited to be here today and share with you some of what I know. Okay. So cognition and the older drivers, and many in this field are calling it the driving tsunami. Right now, 40% of the North American driving population are aging baby boomers, which equates to about 87 million drivers. In 2030, they estimate that 44 million seniors will hold a driver's license. From that, 1 in 9 baby boomers are at risk of cognitive impairment, and sadly, that risk increases with age, according to the Alzheimer's Association. So in the next 10 years, there's the potential of at least 10 million drivers needing to consider stop driving. And for the first time in US history, older adults are projected to outnumber kids by 2035. So it's really raising alarm bells for many people that work in this area about the increased safety and what are we going to do about it. So in 2018, according to the National Highway Traffic Authority, 6,907 people aged 65 and older were killed in traffic crashes, making up 19% of all traffic fatalities. And what is really concerning is that these fatal crashes occurred during daylight hours, on weekdays, and involve multiple vehicles. So some common crash scenarios. We know for many older drivers where there are changes perhaps with their cognition, that the left turns are really difficult, and that's to do with some changes in the brain with visual spatial relations, changing lanes or merging, rear end collisions, and what we call novel situations, roundabouts. Some of the issues that older drivers may face, stiff joints and muscles. A lot of people have arthritis, and it can really impact head and neck mobility where they can't look over their shoulder to look into the blind spot beside their car. Every car has a blind zone. It can affect their grip and strength, their balance getting in and out of the car, walking around the car, and their ability to manage their own walking aids like walkers and canes. Some drivers will have trouble seeing, hearing. As we get older, we have slower reaction time and reflexes, and medications can affect driving, as well as medical conditions can also contribute to cognitive decline. The goal with the service that I offer and with the technology, say it up front, is to protect the safe, good drivers and to identify those that really need to think about transitioning away from driving, and to make the roads safer for everyone, because we are all impacted by this. So what changes with normal aging? Our senses, vision, hearing, taste, touch and smell. And with vision, glare recovery. Like you might notice that, when you drive at night, if you're in this age bracket, it's really hard for your eyes to adjust after looking into oncoming traffic with the headlights, especially the LED lights. As we age, we have reduced what we call peripheral vision, which is, being able to see, hear off to the sides. And that is actually our early warning system with defensive driving, that we're able to kind of see ahead, see an object moving and be able to anticipate them. Our ability to focus on small objects and print. I'm sure that, many people, when they go out to a restaurant and we've got multiple reading glasses, they're on and off with the menus. And the ability to switch from near to far becomes compromised. But we need to be able to do that because we're looking at our dashboard, we're looking at all the controls, then we're looking out of our windshield, looking in our side mirrors. So mind your eyes. So of all of the senses that we have, vision is the most important sense we have when driving. And they estimate that 90% of the sensory information we need for driving is actually visual. So we need to be able to scan ahead, anticipate potential hazards, and vision can be impacted by a variety of diseases which is common to aging, like cataracts. And you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen here, there are some photos here of what it looks like for a person with cataracts. It's really blurry. Macular degeneration down the bottom left, where the center of the image is really hard for that person to see, and glaucoma, where it's the outer perimeter, and then at the top, diabetic retinopathy. Medications, there are many medications that can potentially impact driving skills, and we always advise check with your physician and read the information that comes with your prescription. They give a good handout. Go and get a consultation. It doesn't cost anything. Find out if it's going to impact. We know that 30% of older adults use 5 or more prescription medications, and sometimes the combination of that can really interfere with driving ability. There's been a lot of studies on benzodiazepines that there is a high risk of having a traffic crash in older adults when people are using those. And the crash risk is likely to increase when you're using alcohol or when you have other potential driving impairing medications that you're taking with that. And there are many medications that can also then impact fall risk. So alcohol, one serving of alcohol has the potential to impair driving performance, and you may be impaired without even knowing it. And so what happens as we age is that there are changes in our body composition. We tend to carry more body fat. We have less lean body muscle. There can be changes in function, like with your kidneys. And so your blood alcohol composition, concentration can change and really impair your ability to drive. And if you're on medications that, you know, maybe you've been on someone's been on medications for many years, their tolerance level can then change, and then impact on driving. So some of the medical conditions that can compromise mental fitness to drive. So cardiovascular disease, like, you know, congenitive heart disease, stroke and TIAs, mini strokes, head trauma, respiratory diseases, renal, cognitive impairment, even mild cognitive impairment where, you know, it's able to be noticed by other family members, friends, but not enough to impair what we call activities of daily living. The many dementias, neurological diseases like Parkinson's, metabolic, psychiatric, medications, functional decline and falls. So the latest research is saying that if a person's had more than 2 falls in 12 months, they really should have a neurological and a driving assessment. If you're seeing someone in your family or your neighbor or a friend and they're just not moving as well as they used to be, especially since the pandemic, with so many that were isolated and having to, you know, stay at home, if you're really seeing a general decline in just the overall functioning of, you know, whether they're starting to forget, you know, how to paying the bills twice, or not being able to move around the house as easily, like it's the whole range about that. So what is cognition? So cognition is the ability for us as human beings to have insight, where we have that capacity to kind of self-reflect. We can react, we are able to learn, remember, respond, and think. When it comes to cognitive impairment and driving, you'll see on this screen a whole range of medical conditions, and at the end in orange is cognitive impairment. Those drivers who have a cognitive impairment are at a 3.4 times increased risk of having an at-fault collision, more so than even alcohol. Pretty terrifying. So what I like to do when we think about a cognitively healthy brain is I have a lot of people who will ask me, what does cognition have to do with driving? Can't my mum be rehabilitated? You know, she's been driving for 60 years. She's never had an accident. And I always compare our brains to buckets because it's the easiest way to do this. And so when we drive, our brains hold information. So we can hold here, you know, basic driving skills. So we can manage speed, we can judge distance, we've got control of the vehicle, we're in our lane, we're able to plan where we're going, we can listen to GPS, we're able to kind of focus our attention. We can manage being out in the traffic, you know, we're able to move over the side of the road if there's a siren, can kind of get lost in your own thought, can even have conversation with passengers, music playing, that kind of thing. However, if somebody steps out, like a mum with a stroller or a cyclist, we still have something unexpected. We still have enough mental capacity to be able to think, react, and respond. The person that has a cognitively impaired brain, and again, this is about capacity, too much information needs to get processed, and the cup becomes what's known as overflowing. Too much information needs to be processed all at one time beyond the basic driving skills, and they don't have the ability to think, react, or respond, and they become cognitively loaded, and we don't know what skill is going to become impaired, whether they're going to put on the gas or the brake or whatever else it may be. So what do you do about this when you have a loved one and you're worried that maybe they're not safe to drive anymore? And if you are feeling brave enough and you're living out of town and you're visiting for the holidays, it's really good for you to see for yourself and to go for a ride along with your loved one. Don't comment or criticize during the drive. Talk when you're both out of the car and you're safe, and calmly state any safe actions that you saw without sounding judgmental or angry. And make sure you are specific. Give examples where possible. You can't just give an opinion, you really need to give examples. And the number one question I always say to my clients, families that come in, where they're inquiring about whether they need to have a driving assessment of mum or dad or the husband or wife, I always say, ask yourself, would you allow your young grandchild to ride alone with mum or dad? And if the answer is no, then it's time to take some action and find out more about what is actually going on. So there are lots of warning signs that there may be a problem with driving. Dings and dents on the vehicle, mailbox or garage, and when you ask about it, no explanation can be given. And that might be because the driver is in denial, or it might be because they honestly don't remember. Close calls where they may come home and tell you in the phone call or in person that somebody nearly sideswiped them. Often drivers with cognitive impairment will drive too slowly. They'll miss traffic signs, or they might stop in traffic for no apparent reason. Scary, some will not stop at a stop sign or a red light. They might even drive over the median. Incorrect signalling, getting lost or confused in familiar places, forgetting the purpose of trips, confusing the brake and gas pedals. For those that live in California, there was just a couple of weeks ago a terrible accident, it was an accident. An elderly gentleman that ran through the glass windows at Trader Joe's in Castro Valley. Nobody was killed. There are other non-driving signs, and I said earlier about 2 or more falls in a year, where the person's losing their strength or balance. You're starting to see that they just don't have the stamina, the endurance that they used to. If you're starting to see a decline in ability to do everyday tasks at home, from balancing the checkbook, paying the bills a few times, not preparing meals for themselves, forgetting that there's food in the fridge, overall kind of memory loss. A really big one is unaware and having a lack of insight about their own driving errors and other vehicles. More warning signs include being honked at by other drivers. If you have your loved one come home and said, I can't believe how many people were picking the horn at me today. It's crazy out there. Moving into a wrong lane. Poor judgment making left turns. Older drivers who have a cognitive impairment tend to have 5 times more at-fault crashes making left turns. They're really risky. Trouble navigating the turn, hitting curbs, parking inappropriately, sometimes, at a diagonal inside the parking spot. Confusion when they get to parking lot exits. Driving at inappropriate speed. Some people will actually even drive too fast. Delayed responses to unexpected situations, kind of freezing. Becoming angry, frustrated, or confused behind the wheel. And when maybe friends and family no longer want to be a passenger, kind of a red flag. So what do you do once, you might see some of these things? There's some research out of Texas that says if you see 6 of those signs, then it's time to go and get checked. You know your loved one. That's something that is a very personal situation in every family. But at the end of the day, if you're an adult child, we need to really take action and step up and protect your loved one and other drivers on the road, because they're just unable or maybe unwilling or incapable of doing so themselves. So what are some of the next steps? First thing I always recommend is schedule a physical checkup. Get a vision test. I had a case where a woman came in. She did not do well on the driving assessment, first portion of it, and her scoring on that was a red flag for me, because She had mild cognitive impairment, but she was showing that she really should stop driving, and it wasn't kind of making sense. Well, it turned out that she hadn't had a vision test for 2 years, and she had cataracts. So she went and had surgery, came back 6 months later, and she's been cleared to drive and back on the road. Have a professional evaluate the older adult driver's skills. And these are people known as certified driver rehabilitation specialists. There are some driving schools around the country where they will have driving instructors that will go out with older drivers and review all of that. And I've got some information at the end for where you can find that information. Important for you to know when to have the conversation. Timing is everything. Don't have it in the car when you're seeing concerns right in front of you. It's going to be really anxiety producing for both of you. Enlist the support of family and friends, and make your conversation compassionate, and be prepared for resistance and even anger. And this is tied in with fear of losing control. You know, I hear this all the time. A lot of drivers will tell me privately, away from their kids, that, you know, my daughter's taken over everything in my life. She's paying all my bills. This is the last piece of my independence. I don't want to lose my ability to drive. And it's part of why some get so angry, because it's a really scary and potentially devastating and life-changing time. So tips and strategies for having the conversation. Be prepared. So list your safety and medical concerns. Check out what are the legal concerns and the licensing requirements in the state that you live in. Here in California, doctors are mandatory reporters. You also, as a resident, as a concerned community member, can also anonymously let the DMV of California know that you've got concerns about maybe your neighbour's driving or your loved one, and they will then send out a letter to the driver asking them to come in for a review. You want to be prepared by planning for future transportation needs. Plan early, especially if the illness is progressive, you know, with the dementias that are out there. Be strategic, consider family dynamics. You might have brothers or sisters that may not even acknowledge the problem or don't even want to deal with it, even if they do know. Decide who is best to raise the topic. Usually it's best somebody that's close to the older driver, somebody that's, you know, less reactive, somebody with kind of a calmer personality. Be aware that your loved one may lack insight, and expect resistance and even the anger. Remain positive, focus on what you can do. Be sensitive, but resolve that you do need, if you're seeing these concerns, you're seeing these warning signs, that you really do need to take some kind of action and find out what is really going on. Always best when you start out like this, talk one-to-one. Don't make this a big family affair around the Thanksgiving table. When it's appropriate, and acknowledge their past driving record and note that things have changed. Blame the medical condition, not the person. Really important to not personalize this. Be responsive to their concerns, listen with compassion, and ask for their opinion about their own driving ability and their own feelings of security on the road. You may find that some drivers will kind of acknowledge that, yeah, there's been some things that have kind of worried themselves, and appeal to their sense of responsibility. You know, talk about the implications of a crash. I often tell families that when they're struggling with this, try and have their parents or their spouse, try and have them put themselves in the shoes of a mother who's walking, who walks out off the curb with the stroller with the baby and gets hit by an older driver. You know, about, you know, that level of empathy. Quite often that helps with the driver to see that they obviously, you know, nobody wants that kind of tragedy to ever happen for anyone else. Focus on the need for a driving assessment, and talk about future transportation needs, especially if you're talking about if they need to start thinking about moving away from driving, you want to have options in place. You want to be able to show that you're not just saying you can't drive anymore. You want to have some other resources up your sleeve and share what you know so far. And if your spouse or your loved one is getting really agitated or just says, shuts you down, I don't want to talk about it, starting to get really angry, just gently end the conversation and come back to it a day or two later. If you find that talking one-on-one is not really going anywhere, try 2 family members with your concerned loved one. And if that's not successful, try involving family and friends, and what some people would call an intervention, where you're really trying to come from a place of care and concern. When you have to say, when you have no other choices and you're met with like complete resistance, which happens for quite a few families, safety is paramount to the driver and others on the road. Like, keep that in the back of your mind the whole time. And so you would need to obviously remove all the keys, and families have really creative ways of doing that. Some will just take the keys and hide them. Some will ground down the car key with like an angle grinder. Some will take the battery out of the key fob. Many families park the car at a distance away from the home until they decide what the next steps are going to be, so that it's harder for their loved one to actually physically walk. Discontinue the insurance. Some will remove the battery. They'll put a note under the hood saying to the mechanic, do not repair the vehicle, or disconnect a whole bunch of wires. Others will gift or sell the car. I even had one case where the family drove mum's car to a high theft area here in the Bay Area, left the car there for it to be completely vandalized. They didn't care about the insurance, they just wanted to keep mum safe. And were able to show her, when the police reported what had happened. You need to organise a picture ID, and if you need help, send a short, respectfully worded letter to your loved one's doctor. Detail your observations, voice your safety concerns, and ask the doctor for their help, especially if you are living outside the California area, where not all the doctors are as proactive as we would all like them to be. Like, you are entitled to ask for their help. Transportation options vary community to community and state to state. Some of the ones that are well known are the volunteer driver programs, and they kind of work at county level and also state level. There's a group called the National Senior Transportation Network. I've got their website up here, itnamerica.org. And that started out of a woman whose son was seriously injured by an older driver. And she set up this group, and they match older drivers with volunteers. And they operate in 10 states, in rural and small communities. So they've got a lot of information on their website. Paratransit
Alexa, stop timer.
Oh, say that again. Yep. Paratransit services, door-through-door services, Uber and Lyft. GoGo Grandparent is another great service here in the Bay Area. I'm not sure about whether that operates in other states. Taxi services, public transportation, but the bulk of burden in reality falls on families, friends and neighbours, especially if the person has a cognitive impairment. It's not safe for many of those people to travel on their own. And that's why, family, friends and neighbours, everybody needs to kind of step up where possible to help. We don't want to increase the risk for these older drivers that have their mental fitness to drive compromised. Resources available. Local senior centres, also known in some areas as community centres. Many of them have volunteer ride programs and shuttle services. Driver rehabilitation specialists. I've got the website up here, aota.org. Another great group is the Aging Life Care Association, also known as previous as geriatric care managers. They provide like case management. They have a bunch of resources at their fingertips. They help support families. They even help with mediation. Healthinaging.org have fabulous tips and fact sheets on older drivers and aging on a whole variety of topics. And of course, AARP and the CarFit program, which is run by AARP and AAA, is a program run by volunteers across the US that matches and fits the senior's car to fit them physically. So volunteers are trained, and it's a community event, and the person's sitting in their car and the car is actually fitted for them so that they can see over the steering wheel. They're 10 inches back from the steering wheel, their seat's the right height. There's a couple of volunteers that will physically help the driver with their side mirrors so that they can reduce the blind spot area, which is, really important. Help, show them all of the tips and tricks in their car to help make driving a lot easier. So that's a great program there as well. Here is my contact information. I'm very happy to share with you resources. If you would like a list of the warning signs and some other resources that I have, you can always email me or give me a call, and I'm happy to mail that out to you or send it by email. I like to be a resource for all of you that are having to deal with this complex issue. And my website is at the bottom, dcacbayarea.com as well. So that's the end of my presentation.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I will open it up for questions and give people time to unmute themselves or put questions in the chat box if anyone has anything to add, share, or questions. Anyone? I'll share a little quick story myself while we're waiting for people to unmute. I've been sharing stories about my family all week, so I hope they're not angry at me by the end. But this is about my father-in-law, who actually just passed away in April, but he had an incident like what you were talking about. He was driving all his life. He loved driving. In fact, he was a pizza delivery driver on the side at night in his little small town because he loved just getting out and talking to people. He did it. He started when my husband was in high school. My husband just turned 50. So that tells you how long he was delivering pizza for Domino's. But he went to Rite Aid one night, and it was after they moved here. So he had stopped working for a couple of years. And he got confused and he hit the gas instead of the brake, and he had an accident. And thank God he only hit the pole, the light pole, and not a person, but he did it in front of a police officer, an off-duty police officer, who called the ambulance because he was confused. And it set off this whole series of him eventually losing his license and not getting it back. But that conversation sure was a lot easier for a doctor to say you can't drive anymore than for any of us to have that conversation, because for him, driving was such a key part of his life and his independence. And even here, looking back now, I see he was getting confused because he was asking directions how to get, cross streets and things that I thought he was just learning his way around. But now looking back, I see he was confused. And if I'm working in this industry and doing it all the time and I miss the signs, it's easy to miss, right?
Yeah, very. And sometimes the driver can be really strategic themselves about covering up.
Mm-hmm. He was very good at it. So I'll check with everybody on the line. Any questions? I did not see any in the chat box. And one of the other things that we're talking about with this book too, and with our organization and our mission of education, it's just to have people be proactive in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have the discussion before it's an issue. Do you find that helps when it comes time?
Absolutely. And, I think trying to put yourself in their shoes really helps to understand why there is the fear and the upset, and quite often the anger. And like I was saying earlier about losing control, and driving is like the symbol of ultimate independence. But it's not. We really need to change our views about driving is not a right, it really is a privilege. And when things start to change, and it's not about necessarily taking away the keys just because you have an opinion as a son or daughter. It's about getting that assessment to make sure that they are still safe to drive. That's what I love about this technology is, which I meant to say, it is available in other states around the US, but normally operates out of a hospital setting. So you would need a physician's order, a referral. But it's a wonderful piece of assessment technology because it's measuring that interaction, and it's objective and fair and accurate, and it's not the family's opinion. It also predicts how well the person will perform on the road. Oh, that's my answer machine. Excuse me. Turn the volume off. Oh, sorry about that. I can't mute it at this point.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, they hung up. There we go. So I think trying to be as objective as you possibly can, but coming from a place of care and concern and being proactive, you really need to do that, because the ramifications, when the person has a crash, it's too late. We know that there have been problems there for probably months, if not years before. So it is a hard conversation. It can be emotionally really harrowing. You might have mum or dad not wanting to speak to you for days or weeks. They might threaten to, take you out of the will. I mean, this is why it's so hard, especially for adult kids, to have these conversations, because they don't want to see their mum or dad get depressed about this. They don't want them to be upset. They want things to be happy, even keel. But at the end of the day, we have to step up and take action to protect them. They're not in a position mentally to be able to do that for themselves.
Do we have a question? Anyone questions? So maybe you can talk a little bit about your driving assessment. I know that you have a vehicle that's set up like when I learned how to drive. Yes, with you have pedals on your side, and the older adult has pedals on their side.
Let me just quickly unmute, unhide my slides. I wasn't sure if people wanted to see all of this. I'm here.
I'm a little curious because I like that there's science behind that, and that makes the conversation so much easier when it's not just, oh, we've noticed you're slipping, which is, you're already automatically putting somebody on the defense. Here's the science, here's the facts. Let's protect you and not hurt yourself or others.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So the screen, can you see that screen here,
yes.
Tara?
So
the company is Drive-Able Empirica, and they do a lot of driving assessment technology for like commercial trucking companies, school buses, and health professionals. So because of my unique background working with seniors and having a driving instructor background in social welfare, I was able to get my licensing to bring this technology to the Bay Area. So here at my office is here in Pleasanton, East Bay, 1 hour east of San Francisco. And so I set up my service as a standalone assessment center where families don't need a referral to come in. I get referrals from doctors, but I'm what they call a private pay. So families will call me directly, or the drivers will, or their spouses, and then I'll get referrals coming in from neurologists and primary care physicians. So this particular technology is designed for an experienced driver who has a medical condition or maybe is taking medications that could be interfering with their mental fitness to drive. So typically, my clients would have one or more medical conditions or treatments that may be causing changes. They're medically impaired, where there's actually been some observed changes that are making them unsafe to drive. You know, maybe they've had already a collision, and a more new area is the post-pandemic driver, where the family is seeing a decline in activities of daily living. They've had two or more falls in a year, and they need a baseline. They want to know, where is my parent actually at? So that the testing equipment, it's an all-in-one computerized, this kind of two portions. The first portion is what's called the DPAT. It's a drive-able cognitive assessment tool. It's this all-in-one unit that the driver comes in. They're not on their own. They're guided through a standardized test, and we make sure that they have opportunity to practice, and they either touch the screen like on a microwave or press one of the three buttons. And it's testing in 6 task areas: coordination of their mental abilities, motor speed and control, the span of attentional field, there's videos of driving situations, spatial judgment and decision making. That's a big one, especially with left-hand turns, and how quickly they can shift their attention. If the child with the soccer ball in that photo is, running out, how quickly they can shift. So it's, the whole thing is kind of combined. It then compares that person's results to somebody the same age, so it's age normed, it's standardized. The technology has been around for 18 years. They've done over 100,000 around the world, with over 80,000 in North America alone. And it predicts how well the person will perform on the road in a specialized on-road evaluation that we offer as well. We have a specific built road course that's measuring the degree, the severity, the frequency, the types of driving errors that the person is making, because we know from the research that those drivers make different driving mistakes to other drivers, normal, healthy drivers. And again, comparing to somebody the same age. So the person receives a 2-page color report. We very much follow HIPAA, so the report doesn't go to the DMV, doesn't go to the auto insurance carrier. The person has to sign off with who is allowed to receive a copy, even their children, even their spouse, even their doctor. Like, it's just not automatic. And it's in color, so it's visually really impactful, and it's predicting the probability of how they would perform on the road. For those interested in the science behind it, there's a 7% mismatch, so it's very accurate at predicting how well they'll perform. It also looks at risk factors and identifies those and percentages there, and also gives an overview of the cognitive functions that were assessed and how they perform. Here's an interior of my office here, the waiting room. And then this is one of the assessment rooms. You can see the equipment there. With the pandemic, we've installed, this plexiglass that goes all the way to the roof, person sitting on the right side, and they're guided through it. We give them several opportunities for practice, because I need to be sure that they understand as best as possible what is being asked of them. It takes about 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the degree of cognitive impairment. Results are available in a couple of days, depending on how many assessments are happening during the week. And this next photo is the door, which is the on-road evaluation. And again, scientifically validated, looking at competence decline, and in like an urban area here in Pleasanton. So if those drivers, they need to come all the way out here, but I'm looking to kind of have those road course built in other counties around San Francisco Bay Area. And the car has dual control, not just a brake pedal, but brake and gas, and trying to minimize risk to myself, the driver, and everyone else around me. And so this particular evaluation, it's a pass or a fail. And the drivers that need to come back for this are those people where their cognitive abilities may be affected and we need more information, or they're in the lower end of moderately affected, and we just really need to just do a little bit of further eval. I also offer a what's called a mature driver refresher together session for those drivers that are safe to drive. You know, they've been cleared, they've done the first portion, they want to improve their defensive driving skills. They've driven, say, you know, in the last year, they've got their DMV behind the wheel coming up. Their confidence has, you know, kind of declined a little bit. So I will go out with them on the road. We start off in the instructor vehicle for half an hour and then go out with them on the road and work with them one-to-one. And sometimes they need just one session, sometimes they need a couple, all depends on the driver. I wanted to let you know too, the cost for the at my office, the cost for this is $300, and it is private pay. Unfortunately, insurance, medical insurance doesn't cover driving assessments. We really need to change that. It's a problem here in California. I don't know what it's like in other states. And then for the on-road evaluation, it's $325. Anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I was very curious how all of that worked. So I will do my last shout out for questions. We're coming up on the hour, but I just had one more question for you. And it's something that we mentioned in the book as well, that if all else fails and you have to report to the DMV, hey, we think this person is unsafe, and they get that letter. Can you walk us through the steps? Is that completely anonymous? Are they going to know that my daughter turned me into the DMV?
And I can only, good question, Tara. I can only speak really for California. So it is anonymous and it stays anonymous. Anyone can report, like even if you're on, even you're a neighbor and you see some reckless driver in your neighborhood, even you can report. So the steps, so normally what would happen is the DMV sends out a letter by mail to the driver. They ask them to come in for a review, and it could be an on-road test. It could also even as well be like the written test on the computer. If you need to have accommodations made, you need to let them know ahead of time, and they'll give you some dates, and then you kind of need to abide by that. If the process is different if it's the doctor reporting to the DMV. They have to fill out what's called a medical evaluation form, and that goes to the driver safety office. Every county has their own location with that, and then they send the driver again a letter and will let them know whether their license was suspended or revoked. Revoked meaning that they no longer have a driving license, and you have 10 days from that time you receive that letter to have a hearing. And so I strongly urge that, you know, the driver call the safety office. You are allocated a caseworker who manages, who's involved in your matter from beginning to end, and let them know what your intentions are. Some people will go and hire an attorney. I don't, depending on the situation and the history, maybe there's a very long, complicated medical history, or maybe there's been other driving issues that have been reported to the DMV. That's really a case by case, but most people, in my experience, they will just deal with the DMV safety office directly, one-on-one, and you can call them. They're really friendly, they're very helpful, they're there to you know, help assess whether or not you're still safe to drive or not. And that's a process, and they will give you a date for when, you know, propose a date for when they want you to come in to do the behind the wheel. And if that date doesn't work for you, you have the option to change that. Nothing is set in stone. And if for some reason on that day you are not feeling well, you have up to 3 opportunities to retest for that. They're usually about a week apart. You know, it's the DMV is very much trying to protect safe drivers and helping people to hold on to their driving privileges for as long as they possibly can. But that's typically what the steps are. But the DMV, if you were to anonymously report or even not do that, they're not going to then be able to give you any information about the outcome. The driver's privacy, as we would all understand.
Sure. And then the social worker that is assigned to the older adult, they, I'm assuming, would have also resources that if the license is taken away, resources to provide transportation, or would that be something that go through senior centers and their area agency on aging?
Yeah, and they're not usually social workers. They're but they think of them like a case manager in that it's like a direct contact. It's not like you're going to be given a specific number to call, case number. They're like that's why I kind of call them a case manager, but they're like field safety officers. No, they don't. My understanding is they don't typically give a handout of alternate transportation options. So if that's going to be the case, if you're in California, and even if you're not, I'm always happy to help people get connected with the right services. In the cases where my clients are unable to drive anymore, I don't just give them the report and send them on their merry way. I help the family to get connected to all of the eligible programs that they are able to be signed up for, and will provide, you know, another packet of information. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time depending on where they live, especially if they're out of this kind of urban area and they've come a long way. But yeah, senior centres, community centres, the local transit authorities in the community where you live, a lot of them have the paratransit umbrella, which is designed for those people that are no longer able to drive. Here in the East Bay area, we have a phenomenal program, which is a reimbursement taxi ride program run by Livermore-Amador Valley Transit Authority, where they actually pay the riders to use the taxi services to be able to get around town 7 days a week. But not every area has that. So if you ever need help, just call me. No charge for that. I'm here to support our community and help get you all connected. Try and answer any questions. And if I don't know, I'll ask. I'll find out.
That's fantastic. Do you mind just scrolling back to your screen that has your contact information on there?
Of course.
And
yeah.
I will give everybody a chance to write that down. And, you know, like she was saying, your local transit authority here in Orange County, I'm a little bit further south than San Francisco. In Orange County, our transit authority, they offer free training to older adults, and they'll do it individually. They'll do it for your senior center, your church group, your Red Hat Lady Society, your card playing friends on Friday morning. They will come to you. They'll do it virtual. They do it in like 8 different languages. And then when you're done, they show you the proper way to get on the bus, off the bus, how to set your schedule. Where do you want to go? Go to your doctor's office. Here's how you go. Here's to do it the most cost-effective way or the fastest way.
Yeah.
And then they give you free passes to try it out, 2 free passes. I think it's phenomenal. So I would check with your local organizations as well. But yes, reach out to Melanie. If you have any questions you think of after the fact, you can always reach out to us here at NAIPC. My email is naipc@ageandplace.org. And also our website, ageandplace.org, has a search feature where you can go and find other people like Melanie in our organization, hopefully in your neck of the woods. So thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time out. We have one more session in 1 hour, the mindset of older adults. That's our last session for today. And then tomorrow, it's our last day, but it's action-packed 4 sessions, starting with Medicare enrollment tips at 9 a.m. Pacific time and noon Eastern time. So hope to see you all at some future events. Thanks all for coming.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Take care.